Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Buddies with Knowledge, brought to you by me, Rita Kinga. So, today's segment is very, very, very interesting, and I think I'm going to make it a very, very, I'm going to make it a series or maybe a playlist on my YouTube. I'm going to call it Buddies You Should Look Up To, or Women You Should Look Up To, because I have a list of women that they're just going to give you a breath of fresh air. The first woman we're going to be discussing today is none other than Wangari Maathai. Um, Wangari Maathai is pretty well known because she was an environmentalist, which I'm sure many people know her because she was an environmentalist. One of her many quotes is the ecosystem must be sustained because in its survival depends ours. Meaning without the survival of the ecosystem, without the survival of the environment, without the survival of Mother Nature, we could not be able to survive on our own without the help of anything that comes out of the earth. And she was not only an environmentalist, um, Wangari Maathai was an activist, a professor, a writer, you know, and then an environmentalist. She was also a politician. I think she worked for Kibaki's government as an assistant to the Ministry of Environment. I'm not sure, but kindly look that up. So Wangari Maathai was born in 1940 in Nyeri County. Nyeri County is situated here in Kenya, and she was pretty much born into the times of the colonial era, where the Europeans had come to settle in Africa. And so she was always adamant. She always loved nature. She loved this hearing the river flow. She loved all of that. And so she was pretty so much agitated when the white settlers, the white European, came into Kenya and tried to develop, because they were not trying to develop anything. Pretty much Africa was seen as a jungle, and so that's why they said they were trying to develop the continent. The white settlers said that, but Kenya was okay, Africa was okay before any sort of slavery, before any sort of European country decided to come and settle in Africa. And so her story begins her story begins in Nyeri with her loving nature and pretty much growing up as a girl in that time period. Education was not always a guarantee. Her father was had gone to school for a while, so he wanted the same for his children, not his children. He wanted the same for his sons, his two older sons that were older than Wangari Maathai. And they went to school. And then, a child is always so curious. Her elder brother, I think by the name Deritu, asked her mother, "Why is my sister not going to school?" Kids always asking the most outrageous question. Although this question, I think, helped her. And so the mother was like, "What? For what reason?" The women at that time did not know that even women had equal rights to those, the same as the men. The women had equal rights to the men. And so they pretty much did not know that a woman was supposed to go to school, had a right to education, had a right to food, had a right to freedom of, speaking out their mind. And she was like, for what reason? Why should she go to school? And I guess the reason was found because she eventually joined school. I don't know why she eventually was able to, join school, but she did. And I think in uh, I don't know, 1969, no, 1959, Wangari Maathai was one of the 800 children that earned a scholarship to go and study to the United States of America. by the name, I think, Kennedy Airlift. Kennedy at that time was a senator in Massachusetts, USA, and the USA at that time had no ties with any African country. They had no influence with any African country because at that time everything about Africa was being governed by the colonialists, which who were the Europeans. So Africa at up to this point that they were able to like get a scholarship into Kenya, the politicians of the USA wanted some sort of influence in Africa, and this was one of the ways they used to like get into Africa. And so she was selected and won a sponsorship. I think her headmistress was the one who asked her, "Do you want to go to the United States of America?" And she was like, "Yes." And with the documentary I was researching her on and what I was reading online, she pretty much said it was easy for her to go. And so she went and studied there for 4 years. She studied, she went to a college there known as the Mount Saint Scholastica College in the USA in campus. I think it was I can't remember the state. I can't remember this. Oh, it was in Kansas City. It was called the Mount Saint Scholastica College. I pretty much understand that they have changed the name now. And there she got a degree in biological science. And then after that, she decided to further her studies and went for a master's degree in the University of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. After her studies in the USA, after 4 years, she finally decided come back to Kenya. And after coming back to Kenya, she was pretty enthusiastic and very energized to join, this new Kenya with no colonialism. I'm so sorry, guys, with no colonialism. She was pretty she was energized. She was also surrounded by many young people who were happy to go to school without, being stigmatized because of the color of their skin by the white people of Europe. And so she joined UN, and she was a teacher here at she was a professor here at the University of Nairobi. And pretty much from what I gathered during my research, this was the foundation of where she started doing activism, where she started advocating for women, where she pretty much started all this environmentalism stuff. UN was like her where she laid out her foundation, because at this point she only had she as she was a professor in UN, and most of her colleagues were male. They were of the male gender, and so three so there were only three females who were working as professors at that time at the University of Nairobi. And she quickly realized that the male colleagues were getting a higher pay more than these female, professors, which was unfair because they did equal jobs, and an equal job demands equal payment. And sometimes I think she claimed that sometimes the women did a better job, which is not hard to believe, to be completely honest. Whatever a man can do, a woman can do better. Argue with your mother. And so she advocated, she teamed up with a professor who quickly became her friend. Her name was Professor Mbaya. And so they demanded for equal rights, for equal payment, because they did equal jobs and sometimes a better job than the male colleagues. And so the demands were they were granted. And the only argument she brought was, why did she have to ask for an equal payment to her male, her male colleagues? But even if they were doing the same thing, why did she have to plead, to beg for something she had rightfully earned? So yeah, this so yeah, this was pretty much, well, and was pretty much where she decided she was going to be an advocate for feminism. For I think feminism was the main route where she decided to become an activist also. And so around this time, she in this time when she was in UN, she met her who will eventually become her husband, and I think they bonded. Um, they bonded over the fact that they had both gone and studied in the United States of America. So this pretty much brought them together. The husband's name was Mwangi Maathai. Yeah, the husband's name was Mwangi Maathai, and I think they meet in 1960, and later I don't know where they meet exactly, but they meet through mutual friends. That's how they link up. And later in 1969, they get married, and later on proceed to give birth to three children. But unfortunately, after 10 years of marriage, they decide to get, no, they don't decide. The man decides to divorce Wangari Maathai. Why, you may ask? Because Wangari Maathai, as he said it, was too strong, too independent, too opinionated, too stubborn, and too hard to control. That is the most illogical argument someone could put on a table. Anyway, I digress. But then these reasons, were not enough, or were not strong enough to secure, a granted divorce in court at that time. I don't think even at this time anyone will listen to you trying to say that your wife is too hard to control. That's why you are divorcing her. So he falsely accused Miss Wangari Maathai of committing adultery while they were married. She he accused her for committing adultery with a member of parliament also at that time, a man. And being there was no any official evidence that was brought into court. All these were just claims, but when you Google it, it says the man falsely accused Wangari Maathai. So he lied. He literally lied. And so, but at that time, it's a country for men by men. At that time, Kenya, if you are a woman, you had no say. So the judge pretty much took money and went on with the flow that Wangari Maathai cheated or committed adultery with another person when she was in marriage. And you know her Wangari Maathai was not happy. She was frustrated, and then decided to call the judge incompetent and corrupt. And this led her to her being, um, you know, what she was found guilty of contempt because of simply stating facts. The judge had no evidence. He only had claims about Wangari Maathai committing adultery, but still decided to side with the man. And when he was called corrupt, because obviously this is a fabricated story, and when he was called corrupt and incompetent, he chose, because his ego was bruised, he chose to, put Wangari Maathai in jail. So she was found guilty of contempt, and was sent to Langata prison. I think I forgot doing research on that part, but I'm not sure how many days she was arrested, but I saw in her book someone say that she was, I think, apprehended for like 3 days. I'm not sure about that, but kindly comment if you know. Yeah, kindly comment down below. So again, this whole story with her husband then resurfaced. She was already going through her heartbreak. Her husband, then her ex at this point, because now they're like divorced. The husband decided to tell her to like drop his name, and like the legendary icon that she is, she took the name from Madai with a single A, which is spelled as Mathai, and took and she removed she added an extra A, and it went from Mathai to Mathai. I hope you get what I'm saying. So the man had no reason to like keep telling her, drop my name, drop my name. She did drop your name. Calm down. Calm down. Um, this just goes to prove how much men can be so agitated by a woman being strong and independent. We see this in today's world because I think, this was years ago. This was years ago because she got married in 1969. And after 10 years of marriage, which I think now is 1979, the husband, just because this woman is too successful and too opinionated, decided that I'm going to end this marriage. And he took it to a public level. I also understand that at some point, Wangari Maathai came out and said that they shared two completely different ideologies when it came to politics, um, especially in regards to the assassination of J.M. Karaoke. Maybe, because she's obviously a legend and an icon, I don't think she supported the assassination of, you know, maybe the husband was like the one who supported whatever was happening at that time. And that we see that in today's modern world, because you cannot be with a person who says, for example, with whatever was going on in Israel and Palestine, you cannot be with a person who says, I'm pro-Israeli, I'm pro-Israel, and you say you're pro-Palestine. That those are two completely different ideologies, and I don't think if you are with a person who supports people who bomb a place every 2 days for no reason at all, I think you are as evil as that person. You're not supposed to be with a person who thinks people should be bombed. Children are out of school, mothers trying to find their children, also children trying to find their mothers. It does not make sense. And you cannot be pro-Palestine and then be friends with people who are pro-Israel. Guys, that's an idea. That's also something that we are seeing here in Wangari's story. She shared that they had two different ideologies in regards to politics. And yeah, so they divorced, and pretty much the husband was forgotten by books because I even had to Google his name. But Wangari Maathai, the icon legend that she is, will live on forever. And yeah, in 1977, I think 1977 was when the Green Belt movement was founded. She went to rural cities around Kenya, and she saw, and the women were crying all over, saying that there was no, food, there was lack of employment, there was no drinking water, and this was caused by the simple fact that the Europeans had come to develop. and so they were cutting down trees, basically deforestation. And so now with deforestation, there is no source of fuel, which at that time was firewood. There is no food. There is no clean water. Trees attract rain, and when you cut down trees, there is no rain, therefore meaning your rivers are drying up, which was the source of water at that point. I don't think taps were there. So she listened to the cries of the women who wanted self-employment, who wanted clean water, who wanted food, who wanted a source of fuel, firewood. And so with that, she suggested that they plant trees. And she says that she did not think it was going to be a movement at that time. She only wanted to advocate for women to be self-employed, and she also wanted to advocate for planting of trees, because trees are being cut down every time. Because also at that time, the government, she says that the government at that time, which was now by Jomo Kenyatta, I think it was 1977. Moi was inaugurated in 1978. So I think 1977, Kenyatta was still the president. So that time she says that if a particular government, if a government at that time wanted someone to campaign for them, wanted someone to spread goodness about, the regime, at that time they will bribe you with a piece of land, tell you, take this land, I want you to campaign for me, I want you to do this and this for this regime. And so they will give you a piece of land, grab a land, a public, green space, and give it to someone, someone to just bribe them and do what the regime wished for them to do. So at this point, everyone was cutting down trees to develop where they had been given by the government. And also the colonialists, the white Europeans, had come and they had cut down trees, saying that they are developing the country. And so with the cries of the women, of the rural women, she decided to found the green belt. She did not know it was going to be a movement at that time, but she started planting trees, and eventually it became a movement. And yeah, that's how the green belt movement was born. And now I think we are going to go to the famous, they always were rivals with the Moi regime. If it was not Karura, it was him trying to put I don't know, a 62-story apartment, no, a 62-story skyscraper that was meant to be Kanu's headquarters. They were always, always on bad sides with Moi and his regime. So what specifically started their enmity, let me just call it that, was one day she was she was called by a lawyer. A lawyer came to see her, and she said, I have heard, and this at this point is 1978, and therefore the Greenbelt movement has become a big public movement, that is for environmentalists. And so when the government declared that they were going to build a 62-story skyscraper on Uhuru Park, people were like, this green belt movement, it should be talking about peace, because again, it's for the environment. Uhuru Park is also meant to be, a green space, a public green space. Now the government is trying to grab it for itself. The regime is trying to grab it for themselves. And so with that, Wangari Maathai wrote to court and sued the government at that time. And in the affidavit, uh, she actually mentioned Moi's name. And at this point, I think Moi was out the country. And when he came back, he was like, I'm hearing there's this woman suing me for wanting to build a HQ for my party. And he said that that case was not going to go anywhere. And indeed it did not. But then Wangari then took Kanu to court for the project not to be established. And when Moi found out about this, um, and when Moi found out that she was suing him, he will not. He said that the case will not go anywhere. The judge then said that Wangari had no local standards and she lost the case. So typically, the court judge sided with the regime of Moi. So she lost the case, and being again the legendary icon that she is, she was loved by the people, I think. So she called for a mass protest for at Uhuru Park. And when she did, Wangari then called for a civil mass protest in Uhuru Park. And Moi lost his cool. He started going on public platforms, calling press and calling her abusive manners, all abusive, and he just started abusing the woman for no specific reason. You might wonder why. Also, the parliament stopped its proceedings for some reason and then started calling and calling her names, shaming her, claiming that she was a divorcee. Therefore, I think at that time they thought a divorced woman had no right to speak about anything, but she actually challenged them. She said that she was only interested with what was going on in the anatomy above their necks, which was their brain, and she was not interested with anything that was below the waist, which I'm pretty sure there was nothing below the waist. And so she was only trying to challenge their logic and how they thought, their brain process, And, I think nothing, no one was up for the challenge because, again, she was educated, opinionated, intelligent, intellectual woman who everyone feared, I think. And so that's why they felt so threatened by a woman. And then, so now the public was beginning to criticize the government. And mind you, this whole the building of this Kanu HQ in Uhuru Park was being funded by some British person, was being sponsored by some British person, and also if the British person had decided to say, like, yes, I'm going to fund you, because he had already agreed to fund the project, but then they also needed the World Bank to fund a little. So the public began to criticize the the regime, the Moise regime, and they said that it was not good for them to to snatch a green space. Can you imagine today if we had no Uhuru Park, guys? Nairobi as it is already congested. When you go to CBD as it is already congested. When you feel tired and when you feel like you want to sit down, Uhuru Park, I think, and Jivanji Gardens, I think, is the only place where you can go and sit down and, be calm for just a little bit. So when the public started criticizing Moi's regime and the plan to build the Kanu HQ, the British sponsor decided to pull out his sponsorship because he also had face. He also wanted to save face. He wanted to avoid too much negative publicity, because he also had an enterprise, I understand. So wanted nothing to be, he wanted nothing negative. And so with that, also the World Bank would have been like, so this rich person that wanted to fund you has pulled out. Why would I consider giving you my money? And so that whole plan died. That whole plan never became fruitful, because Wangari Maathai was, strong-willed enough to be able to face a government that was deemed as untouchable, and she was able to challenge them, and they lost to her. The divorcee, they lost to her. And so this also, Wangari Maathai claims that this was the beginning of the fall of the Moi regime, because she stated that if you want too much, then you are losing. If you want a lot, then you are losing everything. Then you have nothing. If you think you want, you- typically she's trying to say that too much greed is not okay. And we are seeing, the more the things change, the more they remain the same, because this is the same things we are seeing today, with us being told that this affordable housing is for Kenyans. They're not for Kenyans. I don't think they're for Kenyans. I think they are for the greed of the people who are leading the country as of right now. It's the same thing that's happening with Shiko and her shop. It's These were the same things that were going on back then, and even till this day, they are still going on. Affordable housing, literally every land, Gikomba was de- demolished. Gikomba is an open air market. Why would you, like, there are so many other spaces you could have found, and no one also asked for your affordable housing. You never asked for the public's opinions. You never involved anyone, just apart from your little minions who follow you everywhere. There was nowhere where public, anyone was asked for their what, where anyone was asked for their opinion, whereas everything that is being grabbed to build these affordable houses is for the people of Kenya. This That does not do any justice to Kenya. So yeah, whatever was happening back then is the same thing that is happening today. And so she also felt, she feared for her life and that of her children. So eventually she sent her children to the United States of America to study more, to study there in the United States of America. And she remained. And even with her remaining, she states that as a- in she will be working in CBD, and someone will like look and see that it is her coming, and they will cross the road so that they will not be seen with her. That's how much that regime, she became a target for harassment by Moi's regime, simply because their little egos were bruised by a woman. And so yeah, that whole project was done for. And imagine a Nairobi without Uhuru Park. We have Uhuru Park today because of a woman. The men who claim that feminists overreact have Uhuru Park today because a woman was wise enough, strong enough to face a regime that was deemed as untouchable. We need feminists. And then after that, also she was caught in the nets of Moi again in 1992, where she led a hunger strike for the mothers of political prisoners who are being held without trial. This is the same thing that we see today when people go, like with the Gen Z Maandamano protests, people going, and then you hear they were apprehended for no good reason at all. This is the same thing because the political prisoners are people who I think at that time questioned the government the same way the Gen Zs, the protests were questioning the government. Why are you taxing us so bad? Why are, like in Moi's regime, like like every day someone was being assassinated. Someone who did not think Moi's regime was worth of being, a good leader, a good government for, leadership. So they were people ending up assassinated. So whoever like spoke up was being either assassinated or taken into custody illegally. So they became a political prisoner with no trial. And so Wangari Maathai led a hunger strike. A hunger strike is like you're not eating at all, and they sat in the sun, and it was actually a peaceful demonstration, and the policemen, and how they come and they are so brutal, and they started beating up the women because it was mainly the mothers of the political prisoners who were there, who were present at the strike. So they beat up the women. I wish you could see the videos of how those literally old women crying for their sons who had been apprehended in illegally, and throwing tear gas to try and disintegrate and confuse the people. It was just like the things we see today. Policemen throwing tear gas for no good reason. Only today it has gotten worse because they use live bullets on innocent protesters. Protesters who are trying to just, get the government to listen to them, to tell them that the finance bill that you're bringing is too much on us. We cannot, carry the burden of all of this. We just need to pray for our country at this point, because the things I'm talking about are the things that are happening today. Throwing tear gas, beating up people, shooting live bullets towards innocent protesters who just are practicing their right, by the way. Protesting is a right. People who are practicing their rights, legally practicing their rights, being unalived for no good reason back then and today. And so when she led, so the police were brutal towards them. Wangari Maathai was beaten to a pulp until she was unconscious. That's how they beat the woman. Um, but then 1 year, after 1 year of protesting, 51 political prisoners were released. We don't know about the rest, but at least 51 were released. And yeah, so that was in 1992. The story about uh, um, Moi wanting to build at Uhuru Park was in 77. This one was in 92. And now in 1998, which I think my generation is most familiar with, is the fight against, luxury homes being built in Karura Forest. I think that is where I know um Wangari Maathai from, because I think here I was I was not anything. It was 1998, but this was closer to my generation, so I know a bit of it. So she led a fight against the construction of luxury homes in Karura Forest. Karura Forest, I think Nairobi, it is at the center. Everything was being built coming to the like surrounding Karura Forest. And every day people are getting closer, closer and closer, closer and closer. So she says that It was actually a white man who called her. The white man was enjoying a horse riding in Karura Forest and met with construction appliances. There were roads that were already being built. A house was being built, and the machinery for building. And so he called Wangari Maathai and was asking what was happening. Like he wanted to confirm if Wangari knew. And so Wangari was surprised, taken aback, and she was like, I don't know. I don't know. And so she wrote, no, she first of all went to Karura to try and survey. Her and her colleagues went to Karura to try and survey, but immediately they got there, they found the whole of Karura forest was guarded heavily by police officers. And they were it was heavily guarded. And so she left and she wrote to the Ministry of Environment, and she just wanted to confirm, is this true? Are you guys constructing luxury homes, in Karura? Why, if it's true, why are you doing this? She just tried to understand what was happening. But then again, they ignored her the same way they did during the 92, where they wanted to build in Uhuru Park. So again, they ignored her. After writing and they ignored her, she decided to go and plant trees inside Karura Forest. Her and her colleagues decided to go and plant trees. She took it to the press and came with people of the press to go on and plant trees inside Karura Forest. But when they reached there were thugs, aka goons. Guys, the more things changed, the more they remained the same. There were thugs, which she says she saw they saw her and her colleagues saw a policeman in a police car in a uniform telling these thugs, we call them goons. Today we call them goons here in Kenya because there are plenty of goons employed by the Kenya Kwanza regime to mess up everything that the opposition rallies sorry. And so she claims they saw um a police officer in a police car in police uniform instructing the thugs, the goons, on how to like get Wangari Maathai and her people there. They were sorry guys, they were heavily heavily they had weapons, heavy weapons. I think even in the video I've seen someone with an arrow. I've seen someone with a with a stick, very heavy sticks. They were supposed to beat up these people. And so they tried to come to a mutual understanding. Wangari Maathai and the thugs, they had tried to come to a mutual understanding, but she was saying that this is the public land. Why are you chasing away people? Why are you chasing away the public? Because this is a public land. And then the thugs will be like, this is not a public land. This is not a public green space. This is our land. This is ours. Because obviously they've been paid to say that. They've been conditioned to say that it is their land, and they have, bought it with their own cheddars. And so she tried to get into a mutual understanding, but they refused. And so when she saw that these people are not coming to an agreement, she said they're not going to plant trees inside of the forest. So she went to the gate. And when they started planting, all hell broke loose, and the thugs came down on them and beat them up. I think there's a clip. I think pretty much everyone has seen of Wangari Maathai bleeding around here on her. I don't know if it's her head or her neck, but in that video I've seen she was bleeding. And also a man bleeding here at his because of being beaten by the thugs. Again, they were pretty much they had heavy weapons. And so after that she went to report to to a police station. She went and reported, and they pretty much the police officers there pretty much ignored her because again the work she apparently is going to distract or disturb is a work by the then regime, which was Moi's regime, that was full of corruption. And again, if you want people to be on your side, if you want people to campaign for you or advocate for you, you give them land. So that I think was what was happening. Even the member of parliaments at this point, they will come after after being attacked by the thugs. She went to the police station, her and her colleagues, and they reported. And but the police officers pretty much ignored them. And but after some time, they gave her the book, to like write down her statements. But because of frustration, she like took put blood on her finger and then signed it. You signed the paper using her blood on her finger. And yeah, the report was handed over to the police, and again nothing was done. It's the government that's paying these thugs, so they have a whole regime backing them up to beat a woman up. And so shoes after pretty much being after you know again Wangari Maathai was a loved person by the public. And so the public, when they saw what had happened, the young people specifically, they took again to the streets and went to Karura and burnt down you know the machinery that was being used, burned down the house that was already being built. And she says that the the construction of of Karura Forest pretty much died a natural. That's how it died down. You know, that's how it got to a stop. No one ever went and tried to build again. So typically that was done. And yeah, um it is a compilation of all the things she has achieved. Again, not all of them, because I understand she's the first woman professor in Kenya, if not East Africa. She has achieved many things. She was the first woman to win in 2004. She was the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize Awards in 2004. She was the first African woman to win that prize. She has so many achievements. I understand even after she came to UN after the USA, she still went back to Germany for further studies. Um, there's so many stuff about her that I maybe I have missed something. So kindly, uh, tell me down in the comments so that I can be able to, maybe we can have a part two. But I'm thinking of making this a series, call it Buddies You Should Look Up To, because you should look up to a woman like Wangari Maathai. She stood up to a whole regime that was deemed as untouchable simply because they were men and they felt like they were something because they were men, which they were not, because they were challenged by Wangari Maathai, who challenged them to come and let her see what they had in their brains, and they did not. They did not come. They just they were just hootering and hollering all sorts of abusive, language. But at the end of the day, no one remembers them. It is Wangari Maathai that is remembered. Uh, so that is a reason. These are all reasons to look up to her. She went to school. She is pretty much an educated body. She went to school. She has a PhD, a master's degree, and a bachelor's degree. she's strong enough to stand tall to a government that everybody feared at that time. Uh, she was the first African woman to like win the Nobel Peace Prize awards. Um, and she literally did not let the fact that her husband, forced a divorce on her to like define her. She remained strong. Even after she was imprisoned, she remained strong, and she was able to achieve all these things after she was imprisoned, pretty much showcasing that whether this man was actually holding her back, maybe she would have never achieved all these things if she was still with her husband. So, yeah. So, yeah, if you need a woman to look up to, a Kenyan woman to look up to, Wangari Maathai is your. And I think that is the end of our video for today. Kindly, guys, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Currently, we are at 23 subscribers. I love all 23 of you guys. Please continue sharing with your friends. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Comment down below anything that you would like for me to talk about. Any topic, anything that you think I have left out in this and any other previous videos, because I also want to talk about pretty much anything you guys can give to me. And yeah, if you are a woman and you're seeing this video, kindly recommend it to more women, because as of right now, it is on like 90% of people viewing my videos are actually men. And they can stay, but I mainly started this channel for men. So if you're a woman and you're subscribed to me, and like you feel like I can, tell something to fellow women, like your friends or your sisters, kindly tell them to tune in, subscribe, and share and comment my content. And so yes, that is it. Good night, everyone. Bye.